I expected to be completely disappointed in this capture card. I expected to just not want anything to do with it, but this capture card is one of the most flexible and unique capture cards I have used in a very long time. It can do just about anything, including stripping HDCP from a copy protected video feeds, but it won't do the 4K stuff that its namesake implies, which is utter just ridiculousness. We're gonna get into it right after this. TubeBuddy is the best tool you can get to manage your YouTube channel. You can update videos in bulk, optimize your SEO, syndicate to social media, back up your metadata, and more, all with a simple browser extension. Head to EposVox.com/TubeBuddy to learn more and download it for free. This is the ClonerAlliance Flint 4KP. It's supposed to be named 4KP because it's supposed to be a 4K pass-through capture card, and I guess it's called Flint because it looks like piece of flint. Do I start a fire with this? It does get kind of warm. The specific model number is CA1080F4P. If you are curious, it's available for about 140 bucks on Amazon. And this is an interesting capture card because on paper it seems really nice and kind of run-of-the-mill with what I have covered so far. It's supposed to have 4K pass-through, 1080p 60 recording, uncompressed access, compressed access, and you got some headset inputs. However, in practice, it is a very different beast than a lot of the capture cards I have checked out. This thing, as far as I can tell, cannot do an ounce of 4K pass-through whatsoever. You see, on the Amazon page, it doesn't say this at all. It just says 4K pass-through, shows it with game consoles. It's like, yeah, pass through your 4K stuff. But it's only 4K 30 pass-through officially. Now, by officially, I mean according to their website, wherein it finally says, because it doesn't say anywhere on Amazon, it finally says on their website that it can pass through 4K 30 and then 1080p 60. But then it also makes a note that 4K 24 and 4K 60 will be automatically turned into 1080p 60. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but I tested this with both the Xbox One X, the PlayStation 4 Pro, and my camera that I'm using right now, the Panasonic G7, which can output a 4K 30 Hz signal over HDMI. Works fine with everything else that only accepts 4K 30 Hz input, and it won't accept a 4K signal. It only accepts 1080p. It automatically tells my camera, hey, we only accept 1080p, downscale your signal. I can't make it work. That being said, I did notice when I was going through all the resolution options, PS4 Pro, output 1080p, as you would expect, but the Xbox One X, which, by the way, Microsoft sent me so I can include in my 4K capture card coverage more, and I'll have a couple more videos on that. I'm pretty stoked. It has a really cool 1440p mode, and that option was available. 4K was not available, but 1440p was available, and when I enabled it on this card, the card itself, it has a little on-screen display that indicates resolution. It actually recognized that it was receiving a 1440p 60 Hz signal, and it let me turn it on. However, the result from that was super glitchy. There were all sorts of like artifacts and glitches across the screen. Clearly too much for the chip inside to handle, even though it almost let me. So that was kind of interesting. Otherwise, covering specs, you do have HDMI input and output real-time pass-through on one side. On the other side, you have a USB Type-C. This is 3.1 Gen 1, so just 3.0 connection port, which does work with the included Type-C to Type-A cable or just a straight Type-C to Type-C connection on my computer. And then you have a line out for your, just line out or for gaming headphones if you have your own volume control, a microphone in, and a line input. And these are actually pretty cool on this specific card, which I will touch on in a minute. And otherwise, it accepts 1080p up to 60 FPS signal at YUI2 uncompressed if you're on USB 3.0, or you can use the MJPEG pre-compressed mode. Now, the cool thing is this card is actually backwards compatible with USB 2.0, which if you're on an older machine or don't have USB 3.0 ports or what have you, you can still capture full 1080p 60 FPS content on this using the same USB 3 cable that comes with it hooked up to a USB 2 port, and you only have access to the MJPEG mode, but it compresses it on the card, and I was able to get just fine of a recording out of it over USB 2. It's super flexible. This is really cool. The card also has a built-in scaler, so you can select in OBS or what have you different resolution options that it will automatically scale to. And for example, on lower-end computers, like on my MacBook Pro I was testing it on, it automatically chose 720p instead of 1080p. and you can, it has a built-in scaler to change resolution, so you have less work done on your processor or graphics card to scale the signal in your system if you desire. It has a built-in deinterlacer, automatically takes 1080i, 60 Hz, down to 1080p 30 FPS, completely deinterlaced. Didn't notice any artifacting, looks pretty good. And it supports 480p, which if you're booting up your console for the first time and, like my PS4 Pro got knocked off power and then was like, hey, you turned it off. And in that, hey, why did you turn it off menu, that's 480p, accepted it just fine. This is also a UVC capture card, which means it works kind of like a webcam. It detects automatically as plug and play, works in Windows, Mac, and Linux. Tested it in Ubuntu 18.04, Mac OS X Mojave, and Windows 10, of course. Worked in OBS, worked in QuickTime, worked in everything I tested so far. The only issue is if you're using something like Photo Booth on Mac, it's going to be flipped backwards because that's what it does. The only minor annoyance about this is that on-screen display I mentioned. It has a little banner that pops up that says, like, whenever you change resolution, whether it's a DVI type signal or an HDMI type signal, and what the resolution and refresh rate is, pops up for a couple seconds. And then if the signal cuts out, it does have a little no signal screensaver. I don't find this to be a huge deal, but there are some people who are super picky about what shows up on their screen, and they don't want capture cards that add their own OSD kind of information to the screen, and you might want to avoid this if that's a big enough problem for you. This card also comes with, in the box, adapters for mobile, so you can take that USB-C Type A cable and, C to A, and route it back to C for both a USB 3.0 adapter, USB 2.0 Type-C adapter, and a micro USB adapter, so you can stream on mobile. We'll touch on this in a minute. To use this capture card, you can use it with any software you want. Of course, I did most of my testing with OBS Studio, but they do have their own software that there's a little QR code on the back for that you scan, and it takes you to the link, and then you activate with your serial number and things like that. And you are given 3 programs with this specific card on desktop. That is a audio mixer utility, which is really cool. The HDML Cloner Pro utility, which is the capture and streaming app. And then you have MP4 Cloner, which is a file converter of sorts for this specific card, which is kind of cool. So in OBS, the capture card works as normal. You choose your resolution, your frame rate that you want, and then you choose between YUY2 uncompressed and MJPEG compressed modes. Now, if you're capturing this via USB 2, you only ever want to choose MJPEG, period. That is the only one that will literally work. If you're on USB 3, depending on your needs, you have 2 different options. YUY2 is completely uncompressed, which means it is going to give you the highest quality signal that your processor will have to do the least amount of work to decode and then re-encode within OBS. Because if you use a pre-compressed signal, then OBS has, the signal going into OBS then has to uncompress that, decompress it rather, and decode it, and then add it to your scene and recompress it in your final export or your final encode. That's a lot of extra work. So you want an uncompressed feed for the lowest latency and for, the highest quality. However, that uses up a lot of USB bandwidth. So if you have a lot of USB devices, or you have some issues with frame rates, or you just want to run a bunch of capture cards at once, you can actually choose the MJPEG compressed mode, use a lot less USB bandwidth, and end up with a decent result. Like most people, especially for live streaming or Twitch things or low bitrate YouTube videos or whatever, you're not really going to notice the difference in quality between choosing the MJPEG and the YUY2. But you kind of got to choose your poison with regards to, do you want to use more bandwidth but less CPU or GPU power for the processing, or do you want to use less bandwidth but more CPU and GPU power? I think I said that twice, but you get what I'm saying. The HDML Cloner Pro utility allows you to take screenshots in BMP, PNG, or JPEG. It allows you to record video in a couple different codecs, including both software compression and NVENC hardware GPU encoding and AMD GPU encoding, which is really cool to see. You can record up to 1080p 60 FPS, up to like 18 megabits per second. Nothing super high quality, but you do have that as an option. Easy software solution if you don't want to learn OBS or things like that. Works pretty good, or it should integrate even into the Windows 10 camera app if that's more your speed. Or QuickTime on Mac, it works with that. You can take screenshots. You can make it go full screen. You can actually live stream with it to an HTTPS like video feed that you could bring in VLC or something like that but it doesn't let you live stream to like Twitch or something like that. It's just a local broadcast live stream that they let you set up, which would be a way if you're streaming like over, if you have, you know, you have your streaming set up over on one computer and you need to send it to another computer that you don't have direct access to and don't want to use NDI for some reason, or specifically want to use their application, you can stream it and then import it as a VLC source if that's your speed. There's no option to integrate a microphone or anything like that from your computer. You do have the line-in stuff though, which we can touch on now, because the second program that it comes with is the audio control panel, which allows you to choose which specific ClonerAlliance device you have selected and then balance your audio levels between the HDMI audio, the line-in audio, and the mic-in audio. So there are two different, you know, there's a differentiation. The mic-in is for the pink microphone jack from a microphone or headset. So ideally, you know, theoretically, you'd be hooking up a gaming headset to the mic-in and to the line-out, which I was using the Sennheiser PC37X here, gaming headset, and it has two prongs, or two, you know, 3-pole adapters, and you plug it in, and it works pretty good, and then you balance your audio levels accordingly so that your microphone is loud enough over top of your game sound and you're good to go. But there's also the line-in input, and there is a difference, like I said, between line level and mic level signals. The line-in input can be used for line out from a mixer, for example, or to integrate music or other sounds from a smartphone, a computer, some sort of soundboard, things like that. So the tests that I will play in a second are hooked up with the gaming headset to the mic in, and then my normal mixer setup here with my main microphone and things like that running to the line in. And then I did a third mix with the mic in and music coming in on the line in. So we can play those samples now.
This is a microphone test using the Sennheiser PC37X Mass Drop Edition gaming headset with Modern Warfare 3 running in the background, mixed within the ClonerAlliance setup. It sounds like the gaming audio is really loud, so I'm going to use the included utility to turn it down. Alright, so here I have completely cranked down the HDMI audio in the mixer for this capture card, which both affects what I hear in the headset plugged into the card, as well as what you hear in the final mix being sent to OBS through HDMI. I think this sounds pretty good to my ear, but we shall see what it sounds like to you.
Alright, so this is what it sounds like running my main mixer, my Soundcraft Signature 12 MTK with my Electro Voice RE320 microphone into the capture card through the line-in input instead of the mic input. I have it turned down a little bit lower than I had the microphone input set to, just because it feels like it's coming in a little hot. But this audio balance, to my ears, sounds a little good, or sounds pretty good. The HDMI audio might be a little quiet, but the fact that you have control over this and they give it to you out of the box and I don't have to manually request it in my review is kind of nice. Modern Warfare 3 still has 150k players online on the Xbox, and it is backwards compatible, so I'm playing it on the Xbox One X here, which was recently provided by dear old Microsoft, and yeah, it seems to be working really well. So our last test will be music coming in through the line-in input while I'm talking with the mic input, because that's quoted as being an option people want.
Alright, so this is what it sounds like with the headset microphone from the Sennheiser PC37X with some audio music running in through the line-in input from my mixer, as well as if you were basically using this capture card as a self-sustained mixer. Seems like I'm able to establish a pretty usable audio balance here. I'm slightly impressed, not gonna lie. Ballistic vest, yes. Like, this is what I would have set up if I were streaming normally, and this kind of built-in mixer is probably very useful for people who don't have their own mixers or want to invest in it, because they just want to stream with their headset, and that's okay. And I would have kind of killed for this back when I first started capturing and streaming, but the technology was not really there. That's a teammate. Yeah, seems to be working.
The HDMI Cloner Pro has one last feature, and that is you have the default preview mode, and then you have 2 more preview modes you can choose between. And that is movie mode, which is designed to make the image appear a little bit smoother and cleaner and more pleasing to watch on the preview. You have game mode, which is supposed to reduce the latency, but, doesn't have very good scaling and things like that to make it easier to play off the preview. And I don't find that really to be viable. I went ahead and tested the latency like I have been with my monitor latency checker here. Pass-through is real-time. Like I said, completely real-time. That's fine. No lag. However, the preview in OBS Studio adds... Actually, I have my numbers here. OBS Studio adds about 88 milliseconds of latency between the input feed and what you see in OBS. And this is actually the lowest of any of these numbers. The software with no mode selected adds 100 milliseconds of latency. Game mode only adds 90 milliseconds of latency, and then movie mode kicks up to 112 milliseconds of latency. However, I did notice my little tester checker thingy here outputs, the graph and the latency, and then some text to indicate, what it is and what the input latency is. It seems like it's only inputting that text every other frame, because on the real-time preview, I had that text on screen and everything. Or on the pass-through, that is. But on the actual software preview, none of that text was there. Only the graph and the, latency bits. So that was really bizarre. I've never seen that before. But, a chunk of the display was missing from what was shown on the pass-through versus the preview. And that was only in movie mode. So it seems to be skipping every other frame, locking it to 30 hertz or something. Really weird. The other app that it comes with is MP4 Cloner Pro, which is a very basic, just FFmpeg, it looks like, based. You can trim the MP4s that you record with this program, so you can trim off the start and end if you need to upload something but don't want something left in there. You can combine clips, so if you have a bunch of recordings, you can put them into one bigger recording, upload that. They have a converter, and then they have a Blu-ray or DVD burner, which actually uses GPU accelerated encoding to convert the files. It seemed to struggle and just kept throwing out errors whenever I used it with files that weren't recorded with the HTML Cloner Pro software, namely ProRes and a couple others. But using the videos recorded with the software that it came with, I was able to import one of my recordings. It burned it to disk, and now I have an actual Blu-ray that I popped in my PS4 and tested, a Blu-ray that has some really mediocre Black Ops 1 gameplay on it. Interesting. It did come with an extra program that I forgot to mention, which was a firmware updater. However, it refused to connect to my device at all, so got nothing there. Quality-wise, this looks fine. Most capture cards, especially once you run it through OBS and Twitch compression and things like that, are all going to look virtually identical. You don't get full 444 RGB over here, but you don't really have the bandwidth to do so over USB 3. It looks great. It's sharp. I had no artifacting, no issues, no stability issues over long recording sessions. I used it capturing I've streamed for a couple hours with my buddy BBK Dragoon. We streamed some Halo Master Chief Collection. Held up. It gets pretty warm, but never had any issues with it. The other feature, which I was debating even talking about, that I teased at the beginning, this capture card ignores or bypasses HDCP encryption. So if you have that enabled on your system, it's not a problem. It will still capture, and it can capture from other copy protected sources. Now, I've looked into this a little bit, and it seems, because I actually had a couple of questions asking about my HD Fury coverage, because those used to be illegal, but apparently in 2016, HD Fury actually won a lawsuit over, I'm assuming they were being sued, but they won the lawsuit against Warner Brothers, who were trying to say that they were illegal for bypassing or breaking HDCP encryption. They apparently won, and it's not illegal anymore. At least those products aren't illegal. And I have seen an influx of these overseas manufactured capture cards and things like that bypass HDCP start to show up and to start be a lot less shameless about it. The way that I actually noticed this at first, it was kind of suspicious how fleshed out the suite was, especially to burn things to Blu-ray as far as their software goes. When I wanted to set it up on mobile, one of the ClonerAlliance apps, now granted it doesn't work with this, it's built for other capture cards, but is an app for their cloner wands to specifically capture DVDs or Blu-rays. Now, I don't have a clue who would be doing this on your smartphone. That sounds like a terrible idea, but it made me realize that's what was going on here. And so I connected this to my Xbox One X, enabled HDCP, it kicked on, signal still worked. Opened up Netflix, started playing a show, no problems. Okay, that's a little weird. Hooked it up to a Blu-ray player, popped in a Blu-ray, it had some weird issues with the Blu-ray menus, like it was super glitchy, and I didn't even hit capture before that happened, so I don't really have visible evidence of that, but it was kind of weird. But once the movie started playing, it had no problem whatsoever. So if you're doing things where you need to bypass HDCP, which specifically the PlayStation 3, this would be super handy with, this will help you out. Because if you're unaware, you can't, historically we weren't able to capture the PS3 via HDMI without a View HD HDMI splitter that stripped out HDCP, which is the copy protection on the HDMI signal. You'd be able to hook it up with this. Kinda crazy. This capture card does pretty much everything except for the 4K stuff that they advertise. So lastly, I wanted to touch on the mobile options, because in the box it comes with 3 different mobile adapters for USB Type-C and micro USB. I tested it with my Moto X4 smartphone. It's more budget oriented, but it's what I have to work with right now. I had a lot of issues with it. It was not a good experience whatsoever. The software seems plenty fleshed out. You connect it up, it detects the card. You can choose between whatever resolution you're importing it in at. For 16:9 signals, you have 1080p and 720p. 480p is an option, but it like squishes the aspect ratio for some reason. You can apply filters to your video. You can draw on the video. You can, for certain devices, not this one for some reason, but you can adjust brightness and contrast. You can even do picture-in-picture with the front or rear camera of the phone that you're using. Now you have to choose your resolution carefully because you don't get control over like resizing it. So for example, if I tell it 720p, then it will like block the entire screen. So I told it like 144p, but then you could get your face cam going. You can choose whether you're using the HDMI audio or the audio from the phone. However, they even pop up and say, hey, please don't use your on-phone microphone because it's going to sound horrible. Please use an external one, which is fair, but you can run your microphone in via here, have a gaming headset, and theoretically live stream or record your gameplays with face cam and commentary from your phone, which myself from like 10 years ago would have just been, my mind would have just been blown by such a prospect. I find it a little ridiculous at this point, but it's kind of a very interesting prospect. However, the problem is most of my recordings from it are gone. It kept crashing every time I would record something. It would like go for a couple minutes and then crash and the file would be gone. And it kept having issues even when I was just initially connecting it up. Like it'd say, hey, please allow permission to access this device. Okay. Please allow permission to access this device. Okay, like the signal just would not stay connected, and I think that's what was causing the crashing as well. So it was super unreliable, super unstable, and the files that I did get from it are variable frame rate reading at like 40 FPS, audio completely desynced. Clearly not a good experience, especially on a budget phone. Perhaps on a higher end phone it might do it. However, even the reviews were saying like the Note 5 was having a terrible experience and things like that. I mean, I'm supposed to be getting a high-end phone for review at some point. However, I've been waiting on it for 3 months. So if that happens, I may return to this with a couple of these capture cards testing the mobile stuff just for fun. But overall, it's not. Don't buy it for this purpose. So yeah, this is the ClonerAlliance Flint 4KP. The 4K stuff is a complete scam and lie as usual, and I have talked about that in previous capture card reviews. However, it's still a very flexible and pretty impressive capture card. I put off my review in part because I didn't want to mess with it. I thought I'd be super disappointed that it was just not super great. But this capture card very much surprised me and impressed me, and I think it's a pretty good recommendation for 140 bucks. Like that's about the price of a cam link, but you get pass through. You can use it as a cam link as long as you're not going for 4K, and you can do a whole lot of stuff with it. And the built-in mixer stuff is game-changing. Like this 10 years ago when I was making commentaries would have been game-changing for people who want to live stream but don't want to include a mixer or things like that, but they still want music inputs and mic inputs. Pretty powerful stuff. Product links, as always, will be in the description below. Just don't buy it for 4K and don't buy it for mobile, and you're pretty good to go. If you enjoyed the review, hit the like button, subscribe for more tech education. Let me know what you think about my upgraded camera setup here. I am actually using a completely new workflow for capturing my webcam stuff here. I now have a new lens. This is the Sigma 18-35 f1.8 attached to a speed booster on my camera instead of the 12mm, it's not in arm's reach, that I was using before. Should look a little bit nicer. Different field of view here. Microphone's off camera. Got a lot of complaints about that, but we're working on it. And recording in ProRes in OBS instead of H26 or X264. So that's pretty crazy. ProRes. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Go check us out on Patreon. We got a subreddit now, Ko-fi, donor box, join our channel memberships, join our Discord server, yada, yada, yada. I'll let you get out of here. I'll see you in the next one.
Reloading. Hello?
Hello?
Are you upstairs?
Yeah.
I'm going for steak, shrimp or supper. You want some?
Oh, no. I don't like shrimp.
Okay, dude. Alright, baby.
Okay. I love you, bro.
Shots fired and they're hitting me.
Hello?
Get the
He's on
bamboozle.
me. He's on me. He's on me.
Hello?
No, I'm down.
Bro.
Are you down? I'm gonna come help you! I'm a ninja. Like ninja. Hey, I don't have a dagger. I don't.
Reloading.
Round 1, beginning ring countdown.
Good, we're inside.
Reloading. Down the hostile.